Mike,
Brendan.
welcome to Undone.
Hey, Brendan, welcome to Undone.
You tired of saying that yet?
I am not tired of saying that. I think that's
Is that our
great
tagline?
intro.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to make it our tagline, but
Pretty straightforward.
it's
It could be better.
straightforward and clear. But hey, I'll follow your lead on that. But
We'll need to start a survey or something.
There you
Ask
go.
our audience what
Yeah.
should our tagline be. But yeah. Who are we talking with this week?
you know what? This week we are talking with Rich Sullivan, and
Rich Sullivan is someone that you have known
for a very long time.
long time.
You know what's interesting here is he remembers me when I was, he says, in junior high, but actually I have not. I didn't start attending here until I was a freshman in high school. But
Were you like a
I
late
was-
bloomer or something? Or
actually, I was.
Did you look like
I was? So I probably looked like
you were
a junior higher, and
Yeah.
and he will share in this conversation. You're going to hear him share how me and my buddy, he names him, were a bit annoying. And guess what? I was annoying even as a freshman, not even as a junior higher, but even as a freshman in high school. Yes, I can definitely see how it could be annoying to older high school girls. So anyways, all that to say, I known Rich, and Rich has known me for a long time. And there were, especially when I was growing up in the youth group, there was ways in which he served in the youth group. And so he's watched me. And what's really cool is as I grew up into college age and was a minister and a volunteer here serving with junior high ministry, I got to serve and volunteer for his kids as they were growing up, and was a part of that. And now, we see these generations, and I think I might have mentioned it during our conversation, but got to see not just his kids but his grandkids grow up in this church as well, and that there's something beautiful about that.
It really meant a lot to him. You could tell that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it meant a lot to him, and it
Means
actually
a lot to him.
Yeah,
Right.
and it means a lot to me, and I think that's what's going to come out in this. And I think you really touched on it there at the very beginning, and probably throughout the conversation too. I think you caught on to that is the amount of length of time that he's been committed to this church.
Yeah. It's like 47, 48 years,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
Going on 5 decades.
yeah,
It's a very long time to be in one church, because my notion is, anytime there's a little trial, we retreat.
Yeah.
We run and find a different church
Yeah.
where there's no trials, no problems.
no hypocrisy,
No hypocrisy.
which will come up in this conversation as well.
Oh, yeah.
in a few ways.
Yep.
But yeah, one of the things that really stood out to me was the longevity and me being in a church for a long time and being in leadership. And he describes the ways in which he was in leadership. You have been in leadership for that long. There's going to be times of maybe disappointment, of even hurt, of the people that you serve hurting you and maybe even feeling alone or abandoned
Mhm.
as a leader. And it's in those, I would say, those valleys, those dark times when there's some, maybe temptations to walk away, to, go someplace else and, start afresh. And I think what's really cool is you get to hear, I think, a bit of that and some type of testimony in that way with Rich. And I would say in ways that when people walk into a church and has been in a church for a long amount of time, they're going to experience that as well.
Yeah.
And so, at least for me, that was what really spoke to me. And I think just with my own experience of being in a church for a long time and being in leadership, and the way in which, and here's probably what I'll point out 2 things. And I think I touched upon it a little bit, made a comment to Rich about it, but Jesus, walked with these 12 men. He was their leader. He loved them. He cared for them. And in the darkest time when he's arrested and faces the cross, the 12 men that he invested in abandoned him.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing is, you see that reconciliation after. No, he dies, he raises again, and he meets them. And he meets them where they're at. They're in an upper room with a locked door because they're scared. And he reveals himself to him. And there's a beautiful interaction with him and Peter, who rejected him 3 times. And there was restoration, and there was fellowship and community that was restored. And that's the path of sacrifice that he walked. And there's a call for that Jesus makes to his followers to walk in the same path. And I think you will see that represented in Rich's story.
Yeah, he definitely leaned into, like, I'm going to call it like the humanity of organized religion.
I love how you say the humanity.
Well,
and it's human sin, right? I mean, it's
messy.
It's
right?
messy.
It's messy. Yeah. And I think often we try to whitewash that. We try to, like, I think you use the term mask. We put a mask on.
Yeah.
And
hence the hypocrisy.
Correct. Right. And so I think there are seasons of hypocrisy in Rich's life that he had to work through and overcome. But it's really simple, right? So there's humanity in organized religion that makes it messy.
Yep.
And I think Rich has arrived at some conclusions about what the Lord was trying to teach him through those struggles and through those trials. So
and walk with him and in the same path that Jesus walked. And there's a call to humility. There's a call to forgiveness.
Yeah. And ultimately, his reflection is this sort of rewarding experience.
Yeah. On the other side,
seeing, 3 generations of his family all coming together and worshiping together in one place that he's called home for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
And that was really heartwarming for him. Yeah. And he reflects on that. So
blessing him, his wife, but also blessing the other congregants and the people that have walked alongside of him and his family for that long too, to see even his grandchildren grow up and be a part of the church and even serve the church in some ways. For me is beautiful to see.
Yeah. And I think for him too, he definitely expressed a lot of joy there. So, and he offers some advice, some wisdom for those who will come after him. Yeah. So yeah.
So one thing that I would say with that is, it's that kind of testimony that I want my children to hear too, who have been raised up in a church. And, growing up in a church where you have a Sunday school class with Sunday school teachers and all these adults pouring into you. And then junior high, they're pouring into you. And in senior high, they're pouring into you. And you create this community. And it's, with very little responsibility. There's a lot of fun. You're talking, about the Lord and engaging and following him. But then there's a time when, as you continue to, be a part of the church, where eventually there will be time when people hurt you. And the challenge is do I chuck it all? Or do I dig deep and walk this and seek conflict resolution? And do I seek forgiveness and reconciliation? And through that, would God do something that redeems, this brokenness? And so what Rich shares with us in this conversation, I have even thought of and prayed for and talked to my children in these ways, and am excited to have my kids hopefully hear this conversation and glean from it.
All right. Well, with that, to our audience, including Mike's kids, find a quiet spot, relax, and enjoy our conversation with Rich Sullivan.
So, Rich, we want to thank you and welcome you here. Welcome to the podcast Undone. And yeah, would love to hear about your story and wanted to bring you back to start with us with kind of where it began, how you were raised and what that was like for you.
Sure, that'd be great. It's interesting that we're even doing this because over the weekend, almost all of our kids were here for Father's Day. And we were talking, and my kids joke around with me because they saw a vanity license plate on the front of my vehicle that just says Harbert. And Ryan's my middle son, said, well, you should have had the eulogizer on that. And I go, well, why is that? He says, because you've done so many people's eulogies. So it made me start thinking about, okay, I've got this podcast coming up with Mike, and I'm basically going to be telling my story. Mm-hmm. But their reasoning was, we don't want to screw it up at your funeral. We want to make sure we get all the facts right. So anyway, we had some humor with it. You know, mm-hmm. I'm going to be 76 in a week and a half. So we were just kind of joking around with it. But anyway, it all tied in with coming here today, Mike. Yeah. It was just interesting for me because it made me start thinking about things. And I had shared more of a brief testimony a couple weeks ago when we interviewed a candidate for membership. But I guess I'll start there. I was born in Chicago. My dad was Irish, totally on his side. Mom and dad, Sullivan married a Sullivan. That's how Irish they were. And then my mom was totally Lithuanian on her side. And in both cases, the Irish and Lithuanians tend to be heavily Catholic. So I was basically raised in what you would call a Catholic home, but it was a little bit different in terms of how we view, let's say, how we view church attendance, stuff like that here at Sawyer compared to being raised Catholic. And being raised Catholic, my mom and dad didn't attend church. What they did was they sent my older brother and I to church. And then the same thing with my younger brother and sister when they were born, because they thought it was important that we be at church, but you didn't really think about it as a kid. Well, why is it important for us to be at church, but you guys aren't at church with us? But, you know, you're obedient kids, especially that generation. I mean, I was born in 1950. That generation, you just did what your parents told you to do. And so anyway, my brother and I religiously, I use the term loosely, religiously attended church. What I remember in the Catholic Church in Chicago was when I was younger, all the masses were in Latin. I didn't have a clue what they were saying. One of the phrases I still remember as a kid was Dominus Vobiscum, but I kind of translated it as Dominoes and Biscuits because I really didn't know what they were saying. But of course, you know, Dominus Vobiscum meant the Lord be with you. The other thing I noticed in the Catholic Church growing up was never had a Bible out. All of the preaching came from the priest, and the priest was always elevated in the Catholic Church. By elevated, I mean he would go up like 5 or 6 steps, and he literally spoke from a podium that was kind of gave you the visual, and not just the visual, but the emotional understanding that he is above you, and that he is the one who can only tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing, etc. And didn't think about it as a kid. But as I got older, that had an impact on me. Another unusual thing about me is usually in Catholicism, you're baptized as an infant and you're baptized pretty quickly. I wasn't baptized until I was 10 years old. My older brother, John, who was named after the boxer John L. Sullivan, he was baptized immediately. But he was born with some handicaps. So I had an older brother who was handicapped, and that affected me in terms of how I dealt with people and things I saw also. I was always kind of given the role that you're the one that needs to protect your brother, you're the one that needs to protect your younger brother and sister. You know, that was the role that was put on me. You're the one that's going to take care of them when we're gone.
And so, even your older brother who had these handicaps, you felt like the one to have to do that.
Yeah, and there were situations, Mike, where he was teased, taunted and stuff, and I would be in the middle of it, you know, defending him and being there for him. I don't say that braggadociously, it's just that was the fact. That's what I grew up with. So it gave me it gave me a real heart for any time I saw people that I feel were treated unfairly. And I carried that through me, and I think I've carried it all the way now through my 75, almost 76 years, and always trying to have a heart for people that maybe were considered the undesirable or the less, whatever word we want to use. Anyway, so that was growing up. Did not get baptized till I was 10. And the only reason I was baptized was in the Chicago school system, if you went to public school, you could get out of class on Wednesdays early by going to a catechism class at the local Catholic school. So every Wednesday I went to catechism class at the local Catholic school, and that's when they found out, well, you're going to make your first Holy Communion, which I had no idea what that was. I was just 10 years old. But anyway, they explained, they said, well, you have to be baptized. And all of a sudden it's like, well, this is a problem. I haven't been baptized. So my mom and dad kind of scrambled, and they got my Uncle Ed and my mom's best friend, who became my godmother and godfather. And they walked with me down the aisle along the side of the sanctuary to where the baptismal bowl was. And I still remember the priest. It was just interesting. Here I am. I'm walking to my baptism, which as a Catholic, that was unusual.
Yeah.
As an evangelical Christian now, obviously that's not unusual. We baptize people as adults, or at least, young adults. Anyway, so that was my start. When my younger brother and sister were born, they were twins, we wound up moving from the north side of Chicago to the west side of Chicago. So I was raised in an area called the Garfield Park area of west side of Chicago. And my grandfather had owned the house previously. And when he passed away, he had two of his daughters still living with him. They were basically old maids, but they weren't old maids. They were only in their late 30s, early 40s, okay? But they acted like old maids. So my mom and dad decided between the other siblings that they would buy the house, because they needed a bigger house with 4 kids now, that they would buy the house. But part of the deal was it included the 2 aunts. So I was raised with maids. I was raised with the 2, and I say that humorously, not disrespectfully. I was raised with the 2 old maids in that house and being part of it the whole time. And my oldest aunt was definitely mentally handicapped. She actually even wound up in a mental institution several times when her father was still alive because he didn't know how to deal with her. And my mom and dad, and again, I think this kind of shows the heart that I was raised with. My mom and dad did not think that she should be institutionalized. They thought that she should be in a home, and the home was with us. So they kept her and basically took care of her until she died in their home, which I have a lot of respect for that when I look back. But it kind of embedded in me why we're supposed to be taking care of each other. And it doesn't just necessarily have to be family, but we're supposed to be taking care of each other. So I kind of had that attitude ingrained in me. But again, with the Catholic Church, we lived in the West Side. And if you're familiar with the West Side in the 1960s, there were a lot of racial issues going on, especially in a city like Chicago. And I remember distinctly what we called blockbusters, which I'll give you the term. What a blockbuster basically was, in most cases, it was real estate companies that would come through the neighborhood and try to terrorize the white people that were living there by saying, well, they're coming in, meaning the blacks, and they didn't use blacks, they used the derogatory term for them. And they would even hire people, they would hire a young black woman to walk down the street with her stroller with a baby in it to almost antagonize white people, think, hey, we better get out of here, this neighborhood's going to change, okay? My dad, when these realtors appeared at our house, my father was so upset he literally threw them off the porch and told them get out. But that's when they realized over the winter, next spring, the majority of the houses had been sold. And the majority of the houses were sold to profiteers, I'll call them, or carpetbaggers, because what they were doing was they were buying up the homes and then they were reselling them on land contracts to black families. And the way that they would make their money is on a land contract. If you miss one payment, you lost everything. Any of the money that you already put in towards the house, and they were breaking up these single-family homes into multi-family houses and packing more and more people in it. It changed the whole dynamics of the community. So in the meantime, I'm growing up in that, and it was time for high school. And the local high school was Marshall High School. Marshall High School at that time was 99% African-American. And my parents did not want to send me there or my brother because they were fearful that, how we would be treated because we were white in basically an all-black school. So we wound up in a Catholic high school, which was St. Mel. And I did my 4 years at St. Mel. My brother John did also. And even in St. Mel, you would think a Catholic high school was run by what's called the Christian Brothers. Kind of like imagine a group of priests, but these were a different order, and they specifically were for teaching for high schools. So the school was run by Christian Brothers. And you would think, okay, a Christian school, then they're going to be really big on religion. What I remember distinctly about my religion class was they had a missions contest every month. And the big thing was if you can get the banner that said you were the winners for the missions contest, the particular homeroom brother that I had, he said, if you guys win the banner, you won't have to do any work during religion class. We won the banner almost every month. And we never did. We literally never did any religion training, nothing. It was just accepted that this was okay. So that was my exposure. Okay, so it kind of gives you guys an idea what my exposure was to, quote, Christianity. It really turned me off. I was not bitter about the people in particular. I just saw so much hypocrisy that this isn't real. This just isn't for me. And I just, after high school, I didn't bother going to church. I was not interested at all. So I was a lifeguard. We moved a little bit further west into a community called Austin, which is roughly it's the last part of Chicago before you get into Oak Park, Illinois. So in Austin, I became a lifeguard. I worked at the local park, and I was also in a drama group. I did theater on the lake. We did a lot of different plays. I really enjoyed that. But being a lifeguard there, I met a lot of different people. And I met Joanne's younger sister, Anita, and we were in drama together. And Joanne also had an older sister. But the drama instructor, a guy's name was Steve Anthony, really, really nice guy. He says, oh, you need to meet her older sister. And I go, no, I don't think so. He showed me a picture. He had a picture of the whole family for some reason in his wallet. There were 6 kids, but he just loved their family for whatever reason. And I said, no, I don't think so. But then every year we had what was called a drama banquet. It was a big thing too. We really put a lot into it. The drama instructor really made the community feel like a great place to be raising your kids. So we had a drama banquet, and we were getting ready for it. And just before that, I had broken my leg. So I was in a cast, and I was sitting in the auditorium, and Joanne walks in with some friends that I knew. All the Irish kids, we all knew each other, but she wasn't Irish. But she lived across the street from a person who I knew. So she walks in, and this was in May of 1970. She walks in, and I just said, who is this person, So I find out later it's Anita's sister. But then she disappeared all summer because they have a home up here in Michigan that they have been coming to since she was a little girl, because her father's was a public school teacher. So they had a summer home, and they literally spent the entire summers here in Michigan. And her great-grandmother was one of the first people to build a house in Bethany Beach in 1925. So her family goes way, way, way back in this area. This is all going to tie in a few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I met her, and I didn't see her again. Then all of a sudden in the fall, I saw her again. I can't remember what it was at. Oh, I know. We were going to visit somebody at another park, and her friend said, oh, you should come with. We're going to go with Rich to visit. She goes, who's this guy, But anyway, she came, which was real weird when you think about it, because she didn't know me or anything. But she'll tell you later, well, yeah, I kind of had an interest. I just didn't really know what you were like. But anyway, we followed up. And eventually we went to something else together, and then her girlfriends all jumped out of the car and closed the doors and left her in the car with me. And it was like they wanted something to happen, you know. So anyway, I finally worked up the nerve to say, you know what? I even remember saying, I said, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I said, I'd love to take you out. And we went out right then and there. And the first place we went to was Burger King on Harlem Avenue on the Chicago side of, on the Oak Park side of Harlem Avenue. Across the street was River Forest. We went to Burger King. So we still celebrate Burger King as kind of a special place. It's as crazy as it may sound.
First date.
But that was in October 16th. That's our dating anniversary, 1970. Okay. Wow. So it's going to be 56 years this fall that we've been dating. But anyway, we really clicked, but her mom got all nervous. She goes in the house and says, I'm going to get an ice cream with Rich Sullivan. She goes, who? And the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Fisher, was visiting her. And I had known all the Fisher kids. They had 12 kids, Irish families, okay? They had 12 kids. We had another family that had 16 kids. But anyway, that was typical in our community. So Mrs. Fisher right away says, oh, Margie, he's a great guy. Don't worry about it. So that's how I started getting involved. But so where we went with that was Joanne was going to church on Sundays at the Methodist Church, okay? Now, Joanne's mom was a Hungarian Jew. She had no interest at all necessarily in any type of religion or spiritual stuff. It was more the name being a Jew as opposed to an actual practicing Jew. And her great-grandmother and great-grandfather were not, her grandmother and grandfather were not practicing Jews either. So, but her mom, in her own wisdom, felt, I want my 6 kids to be exposed to, at least be exposed to religion and be able to make their own decisions. So she, on her own initiative, made sure and went with the kids every Sunday to church. Her dad did not and never did. And he was raised in what they would say was a Christian home, but he never went to church and had absolutely no interest in it. But Joanne's mom, I mean, I think about it, she's still alive now. She's 98 and she lives with us. I give her a lot of credit to be thinking that I at least need to expose my kids. They need to have the opportunity to make decisions on their own, okay, which they did. So anyway, I started going to church with Joanne, and it's like, wow, this is really different than the Methodist church is way different than the Catholic church. And I mean, the preacher actually was a real person who talked to you and had common things you could talk about and stuff. I was just thinking, this is kind of cool. You know, it's different than what my exposure was as a Catholic. So I was kind of hooked, and I think, okay, you know, so this went on for a while, and then we dated for almost 3 years, and then we decided to get married. And when we got married, the pastor, it was Bill Killian, he was no longer there. He wound up being transferred somewhere else by his diocese. So we wound up getting married by a pastor who happened to be a neighbor of Joanne's family, lived right down the street. And we were married in her living room with a very small wedding, just family and some friends. But it was a local pastor who married us. And we got into the whole thing. We had our first 2 kids in Chicago. That was Scott and Laura. And Joanne was the one that always encouraged me. I was a builder by trade. I went to Washburn Trade School and I was a carpenter. And she said, you are so good with kids, you really should consider going back to school and getting your degree and, pursuing that. And I did. So I wound up getting certified as a teacher. So in the 1970s, it was almost impossible to get a teaching job anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the United States. What had happened was during the Vietnam War, so many guys went into teaching because you could get a deferment, and that kept you from having to get drafted. They could not draft you if you had that deferment. And that's when everything changed in terms of unions with teachers, all of that stuff. It all changed because of so many men coming into it. It was no longer looked at as, this is just a second profession for a family, where the wife was usually the one doing it. It became a primary thing. And that's when salaries went up. That's when the union became much, much stronger. So anyway, at that time, there were no jobs. I applied. I also worked as a sub for Chicago Board of Ed the first year. And I applied at over 200 school districts all around the Great Lakes because Joanne and I knew we wanted to be near the Great Lakes. Didn't have to be Illinois or Wisconsin, whatever, just somewhere. I applied at 200 spots, and it was getting near the end of the summer and nothing was happening. I'm still working as a carpenter. Joanne had come up for the summer with the kids to spend some time with her mom and dad, and I was coming on weekends when I got off work, and my truck broke down. And my father-in-law said, well, why don't you just borrow my car, and while you're here, go visit the local school districts, just go introduce yourself. This was almost near the end. This was August, okay, of 77. And I was thinking, there's no jobs in August. They're all filled by now. So I went and personally introduced myself to all the superintendents in the area, all the school districts around here. And then late August, we're back home in Chicago, and I get a call from a principal at New Troy, which was then the New Troy Middle School. It's the old New Troy High School, but it was part of River Valley School District. I get a call from him saying, hey, we have your application, and remember you coming in. Would you be interested in being considered for this position? And I said, well, sure. I said, what's the position? He said, well, we need someone that's certified in math, health, and PE. And that was exactly the 3 certifications I had, math, health, and PE. I said, oh, man, for sure. And he goes, but you have to see the gym. I go, I don't care what the gym looks like. I said, I'll take the job. He says, no, you have to see the gym. So I came. He had me drive over on a weekend. And he met me at the school. And Mike, you may not remember this, but New Troy's old old middle school, the gym floor, every year in the spring and over the summer, there would be so much moisture under the gym floor. The gym floor would raise literally like a skateboard park. I mean, it was high. It probably rose as high as 3 or 4 feet at some points. So I saw it, and he says, so what do you think? I go, this is perfect. To me, it was a job. I didn't care. It was a job. And so that's how I started River Valley. So when we got here, we lived in Joanne's mom and dad's summer home, and we winterized it for the first year before we bought a house. And that was right down on Red Arrow here. And the first year was the biggest snowstorm that hit the area. And everything was shut down. Everything. The only way to get around was in snowmobiles. Red Arrow was shut down, 94 was shut down, everything was shut down. And it was so cool. It was so cool to be here as opposed to be in Chicago, because we had lived through the big blizzard of 67 in Chicago. So we remember, getting a lot of snow. But anyway, Joanne and I decided, you know what? You really should go back and get your master's degree. And in order to get my master's degree financially, she said, I can go to work a couple days a week at the truck stop. And at that time, the truck stop had a full restaurant. It was called the Firebird. Okay, Mike, you probably remember that.
I remember it.
And it was a hangout. It was a cool place. Anyway, she was working there 2 nights a week, and she met a young lady named Daryl Peterson. And Daryl Peterson's family was involved in this church. And Joanne was saying, we wish we could find a church that had something for kids. And Daryl said, oh, you have to come to Sawyer. She said, we have a youth group. We have a youth program. And it was on that invitation that Joanne first got exposed to Sawyer. Meanwhile, I'm still kind of on my cynical end, and it's a new place. And I think, I'm not going right now. And she got real involved. And she got involved with several women where they were doing not necessarily a Bible study, but they were meeting regularly. And I used to joke with her, I go, oh, you're going to see your biblical babes, huh? And, she would laugh, but she was just, Joanne, she was loyal. And I started watching and was thinking, man, you know what? Maybe there's something to this. So anyway, in the meantime, we were hoping to have more kids, and she became pregnant. So she started coming here, Mike, probably around 1978 is when Daryl invited her. And then she became pregnant, and we're going through the pregnancy. And then there were some issues that maybe she was going to lose the baby. So I remember taking her to Berrien General Hospital, which doesn't even exist, I guess, as a hospital anymore. But Berrien General Hospital, taking her there, and I'm not sure how to word this. It was more like I'm kind of wondering what's going on here. Not necessarily like, God, what are you doing? But more like, what's going on here? She should have a healthy baby. And Joanne is very, very health conscious and is thinking, there's no way I can't have a healthy baby. That happens to other people, not me. Well, I remember leaving her at the hospital. They were still doing some tests and stuff. And I was coming back and I was just praying. I stopped near a cornfield somewhere between Berrien Springs and Baroda. I remember stopping at an intersection at a stop sign, and I was just praying. I said, okay, God, you got my attention. I don't know what's going on here. All I did was I just said, please protect Joanne. If we lose the baby, we lose the baby, but protect Joanne. And we lost the baby. But what I saw, I realized that God protected her, and I decided, you know what, I need to go with her to church. Mm-hmm. And I met Pastor Terry Port. He was the pastor here at the time. And I really liked him. And I told Joanne later, I said, did he know I was coming? And she said, no. I said, because she didn't even know I was coming until I told her I'd like to go with her. And I said, well, I would swear he aimed that sermon at me and that he was preaching just to me. Mm. And she said, nope. So anyway, I started coming more, and Pastor Port put me in contact with a guy named Kent Adams. Kent Adams is Steve Johnson's brother-in-law. That family was real involved in his church for a long time. Most of them are in Minnesota now. But anyway, Kent kind of took me under his wing. He was only maybe 4 or 5 years older than me. Took me under his wing, and one of the books he encouraged me to read was Mere Christianity. And I read that, and I was just kind of blown away by it because I thought it was so powerful and so impactful. But it gave me and Kent gave me my first Bible also. And I still have that Bible. But we established a relationship where it showed me what it meant to truly care for one another, not just, hey, that's your friend. I mean, there's truly spiritually care for someone, emotionally care for them. Kent was a real good example for me, but so was the whole church. So anyway, the next thing you know, I mean, I'm in deep. I jumped into everything. I was on Christian Ed board. I chaired the Christian Ed board. I was doing Wednesday night. We had a program called Boys Brigade and Pioneer Girls. Okay, a lot of our kids are familiar with that. I don't know if we had that when you were younger, Mike, but maybe, okay. But anyway, that was a program we had on Wednesday nights, and it was thriving. I mean, we had so many kids coming here in this community. It was mind-boggling. So, and we had a choir at the time in the church. We had organs, all that stuff. And I just thought, okay, this is pretty cool. But I started understanding more and more what it meant to even have a personal relationship by the example I had from people like Kent. What was funny to me, though, is I learned what Sawyer time was. I told my wife, I want to go to Sunday school too, and at that time, Sunday school was right before service, kind of like now. It was mm-hmm. right before the service. And so I said, okay, we got to get going, and then she goes, no, we're okay. I go, no. I said, look at the time. So we pull into the parking lot, and I'm thinking, man, we got to get in there and get the kids into their room, and she goes, well, there's a Sunday school teacher. He's just getting out of his car. She said, we're not late. And the Sunday school teacher was Jim Lundeen. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I just thought, okay, this place is pretty laid back in that regard.
That explains a lot.
It does.
But the thing I appreciated so much about Sawyer right away, Mike, was I saw a really genuine caring for people. It wasn't surface stuff. It wasn't just, oh, how's it going? No, they really wanted to know, how was it going? How are you doing? And I really appreciated that, and I gravitated to that. And I got, like I said, I got super involved. All of my kids came up in the youth program. Then Pastor Jeff comes as a youth pastor. And because I taught at the high school, we had a natural connection between dealing with kids. So I volunteered to work with youth group, and I did that with my older kids, Scott and Laura. I was a youth leader with them So I work with Jeff, and I've known Jeff for 35 years, and their family. And I've had his kids as students, had my own kids as students, grown up with him, have served on different boards with him. And now I see not just my kids, but I see my grandkids in youth group. So I see the ripple effect, but I go back to Daryl Peterson, talking to my wife at the truck stop and just saying, you should check out our church. Because Joanne got invited by Daryl, we have 3 pews of family sitting in this church on a Sunday when they're all here. But that's directly because of Daryl. And I know God was working through Daryl. I understand that, but it just shows you the importance of one individual just befriending someone, just reaching out to someone. So anyway, I've gotten involved, and there's been highs and lows in being in this church. Some of the lows were dealing with some of the personalities when we were having issues regarding pastors and how someone thought a pastor should or shouldn't be behaving. I remember serving on at that time, we didn't have an elder board. We called it a deacon board, but they basically were the elders of the church. And at that time, the gentleman that was the chair of the board, one of the people that we were dealing with was 2 of the people were his own parents. And that was real hard for him. And he basically stepped away from having anything to do with it. And I was like the co-chair, so I kind of inherited the responsibility. And with that, it was very hard because these were people that I looked up to within the church. And maybe part of it was naive because I didn't really know them maybe as well as I did. But because I kind of sided with the pastor and was trying to encourage these people, okay, you have an issue with the pastor. Did you talk to him? Did you sit down with him? Have you gone to him face to face? Well, no. And then we had people standing out in the parking lot as people were coming out of church with a petition. And they were asking people in the church to sign a petition to get rid of the pastor. And that just blew me away because I was thinking, how could you people do this? How could you do this to our pastor without talking to him or sitting down with him? So anyway, I think there were 27 people on the petition, and I wound up contacting. First, I initially asked the other deacons, I said, okay, guys, you guys need to contact some of these people. And for whatever reason, they were hesitant, or maybe they just didn't feel like, maybe it was awkward because they had been in the church for so long and I was new. So to me, it was like, no, we just do it, So maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But I mean, that was my mindset. I wound up talking to all 27 people. And the way I was treated by some of them, I mean, I was sworn at. Filthy stuff said to me about that. And I was thinking, okay, this is your Christianity, So that could have had a different effect on me than it did. My attitude was more like, you know what? You guys got it wrong. I'm going to do what I have to do, and I'm just trying to follow Scripture. I have no problem if you have an issue with our pastor. I have a problem if you didn't sit down and talk with them and work it out, or even ask someone else to go with you. And the whole Matthew passage's idea of, okay, I have a problem with the pastor. It didn't work. Okay, now I'll go sit down with him with someone else. I have no problem with that. Mike, you've known me long enough. It's okay to have disagreements. It's how you go about dealing with the disagreements is what should make a difference between what we say we are and what we truly are. So anyway, there were some tough times, and then there's just been times of absolute joy. Seeing my kids married in this church, seeing my grandkids coming up in the youth program, seeing someone as young as Joe, who I knew much younger, seeing him become a youth pastor, seeing a Dave Hine, who I knew as a little kid, become a youth pastor, seeing the different people, seeing the Amanda Drydens, who I had as a student, and the Kelsey Kaufmans, or now Kelsey Zilke, to see what they have become and how they've taken on leadership. It's encouraged me to realize how important relationships are. with each other. And it's encouraged me to realize how important it is to be an example, or at least to try to be an example. But most important, I think, and I think those that know me well would affirm this, is that I am perfectly fine with someone confronting me to say, hey, I think maybe you could have done this differently, or maybe you could have handled something differently, because I think that's healthy. I think it's healthy to be able to have those kinds of discussions. And I think that's what I appreciate so much about this church. The other thing, and I've said this publicly, at different times that I've done announcements, Mike, is that we have a very unique church here. We really do. I mean, when you look at the makeup of the church, not just the ages, the backgrounds, the ethnicities, the multiracial families. I mean, my son married a young lady from Bangladesh, and it's like, this is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be all of these different groups coming together under the same bond of Jesus Christ. And it's like, it blows me away sometimes. Joanne and I are so blessed. We are so blessed to live in this community, to be part of it. And then the other thing I have, I also have a witness in effect, because I'm an elected official in the township. I've been an elected official for almost 20 years now. And that gives me another opportunity, not just to have people see Christ, but also for me to have a better understanding of, hey, maybe I need to rethink something, or maybe I didn't, that's what I liked about teaching also, is a really good teacher, I think, would tell you that they learn just as much from their students as maybe, hopefully, their students learn from them, because they're always maybe giving you situations that you didn't really think about. One of my best friends, Tom Palin, and I taught together, and we still meet once a month for lunch. Tom would use the phrase, well, unless you've walked in their moccasins, you really need to think twice before you make a comment. And it was really good advice for the students to hear, and that's how Tom's always been. But anyway, I've loved living in the community. I've loved teaching in the community. I know 3 generations of families now from being here for so long, So Joanne basically got started here in 78, and for me it would be more like closer to 1980. Took me a while, but I'm there now, warts and all, so.
Well, what's really cool, and I'm just going to go back a little bit, when you, it was probably several months ago, where you were giving an announcement here at church. And sometimes here at Sawyer, we try to one-up each other when it comes to giving announcements to make people engage and hear you. So people dress up and, sometimes just to grab people's attention. And you brought up all your grandkids.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It was beautiful to see, because, you're kind of bringing up the legacy of the Sullivans, started from long ago, and seeing these beautiful children of all ages come up, and, be part of the announcements. But it just, it was a joy even for me to see the way in which your investment in this community and in the church and your love for the Lord and serving here. And in that, there's been these beautiful families that have blossomed and have been a blessing to others, and including myself in this church.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, Mike.
Yeah.
I remember the thing you're talking about. It was before men's retreat, and I had each kid hold a letter up, but they had it down until I told them. And the message of the retreat was about prayer life. And the last one was Seamus with the Bible, okay? But I had most of my grandkids lined up. I even had some nieces and nephews who later came up to me and said, well, couldn't you make a longer word so I could be up there too? But anyway, that was it. But it was so cool. And for me, though, what you're saying, what you saw, Mike, imagine me as a dad and as a grandpa seeing my grandkids down there, and seeing my sons and daughter in the audience, knowing that they are raising those kids in such a way. And Joanne and I both always try to affirm our kids in thanking them for how they're raising their kids,
So I'm gonna bring us back a little bit and kind of recover this your story a little bit more. And because there's some things that I'm wondering about. Number one is growing up in the Catholic tradition. You said that it affected you and formed you in some ways. And I'm just wondering if you can describe that a little bit more.
Oh, sure. Well, like I said, initially, Mike, I felt like, first of all, when you're a real little kid, it's like you just do what you're told. Okay. So you go to church, you do what you're told. Supposed to kneel? Okay, we'll kneel, But anyway, as I got older, what I saw was I felt like there was a lot of hypocrisy. So that made me have some negativity towards that, especially the behavior of some of the Christian brother teachers in the high school. I mean, some of them were literally brutal, physically brutal to students and stuff, what they got away with. But I also saw another side of the Catholic Church, and that was Catholic Church has always been strong on things like abortion, right to life. They're very, very, very solid in that regard, and they've never strayed from what their stand is about that. That was a positive for me. But what I never got, and it may be different for other Catholics, but what I never got or received was any type of inclination that you need to have a personal relationship with Christ and you need to be in God's word on your own, not having someone else just read to you and tell you this is what it is and this is what it means. The Catholic Church had I don't know if they use this term very much anymore, but they had a term called purgatory. And purgatory is, the way I describe purgatory is, it's like being on an elevator caught between floors. Okay. Either you're going up or you're going down, but right now you're in the middle. And the only way to go up or down in the Catholic Church is if someone else is praying you out of purgatory. Okay. And when my father died and my mom, in the Catholic Church, a real big thing is for so much money a month, we can have masses said for your mom or dad. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, who else is getting masses said on that day? Oh, it could be 1,000 people. So I'm thinking, this is a revenue generating.
You were a math teacher, so you started calculating.
This is a revenue generating thing, and that turned me off. But again, I had some very, very close friends who were raised Catholic. One young lady in particular, her and her husband were raised Catholic, and they will say that they saw Joanne and I as an example, but she especially has said she saw that in me because we were both raised Catholic. They became evangelicals. They left the Catholic Church, and they're in a real solid evangelical church in Arizona right now. And she'll write and tell us about it and tell us about the sermon and tell us about how her husband wound up coming to that same church also after his negative Catholic experience. But what I want to be careful about too, Mike, is, again, I don't remember if you were here when we went through a time in Sawyer Highlands where I would call it, we were kind of Catholic bashing. It was like the Catholics could do no right. The Catholics were not Christians. The Catholics this, Catholics that. And I think that's so unfair because I was in Bible study fellowship on Monday evenings, and Joanne was too. I did it for, 7 years. And I met people from all different faiths in Bible study fellowship. And it gave me a better understanding of, it's not, everything isn't how you necessarily think it was, because a lot of it is only based on your particular experience. That does not mean you have a good view of the entire picture, the big picture. But right now, there are people in our church who come here who are Catholic. And I'm sure that they, like me, probably wonder, man, what is this? This is so different than Catholicism. Maybe I can be an encouragement in that regard for them, even if it's nothing more than, hey, you ever want to talk to me about what it was like growing up Catholic? I can relate. I have no animosity towards Catholics. I have a lot of obviously Irish family. A lot of them are still in Catholicism, but my sister left it. She's in a strong evangelical church in Illinois. Some of my cousins left it, same thing, and they wound up going into strong evangelical churches. And some of them are super dedicated and are loyal to the Catholic Church. But as far as a deep spiritual thing, I didn't get it from the Catholic Church. Like a perfect example, Mike, is Sunday school. First of all, that would be foreign. At least in what I grew up in, there was no Sunday school. You never studied God's word. You were just told, this is what it is and this is what you're doing. And you don't have the knowledge to know how to figure this out, or you don't have the knowledge to know how to have a relationship with God.
So you experienced hypocrisy in the Catholic Church when you were young, and you retreated as a result of that. And when Joanne first started coming here, you resisted.
Yeah.
Because that hypocrisy, that's pain, right? And I know that.
Oh, yeah.
I know that hypocrisy. And when I step into a church for the first time, for most of my adult life, I'm looking for the hypocrites, right? Because I could use those people to retreat. Now, that's wrong, and I've shifted away from that. But what I'm curious about is, so then you come here, as Mike said, and there's hypocrisy. And something had shifted in your heart. Something had changed in your heart that allowed you to remain here, to sit in this space with these people and join and not retreat, not say, hypocrites, I'm out. What was that shift?
Well, that's a good question, because I think if you knew me when I was younger, I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
I would just said, the heck with this, I'm out of here. But I think God's worked on my heart. And I'll give you an example going back to growing up in a racially turbulent area. I realized you can either become part of the problem or you can become part of the solution. And what I did, and Joanne too, is we became very involved in terms of the racial issue. We became very involved in things like Habitat for Humanity. I led houses in Habitat for Humanity for 7 years, and it was primarily in very poor, downtrodden areas. And for me, the racial thing, I experienced racial prejudice. I experienced being beaten up because I was white. I saw other people that were attacked in that regard. As a matter of fact, Lawndale Community Church actually had my daughter speak at their church. She and her husband had been there for 20-something years. They had her speak about the racial injustices, but she brought it to the point of what it was like for white families growing up in a neighborhood that was changing, and they didn't want to leave. They wanted to stay there. They wanted to be part of the community, but it became unsafe to do that. And it was eye-opening because we were there when she gave the talk. It was eye-opening because we had people from their congregation come up to us in tears, just saying we never knew what it was like for the white person. We only knew what it was like for us. And they were just so appreciative. And I was proud of my daughter to tell that side of the story, because there is two sides of that story. But as far as what changed me, God really worked on my heart. It's like, you know what? You got your own problems, and everybody has problems. And what am I supposed to do? The two banners at Lawndale Community Church are love God and love people. It's the two greatest commandments, okay? My feeling is I feel bad, and I don't know if bitterness is a fair word, but I don't have great feelings about those people that attacked me when I was trying to get them to talk to the pastor. But at the same time, I realized, you know what? I'm not walking in their moccasins. I don't know what they're going through. They may have all kinds of other issues. I'm still supposed to love them. And I still have to do what I feel God is calling me to do, regardless of all those other things. So, yeah, I think my wife would say Rich has definitely had a change of heart. You would not know me who I was 30, 40 years ago. I mean, I reacted.
So would you call that just like a slow maturation process, or was there a specific sort of tipping point that you can point to, or was it just
It's probably a combination of both, because a lot of it had to do with, there was a gentleman I worked with at the River Valley Schools. His name was Dick Reith. He was a much older gentleman than me. He was one of the best examples I had in terms of an older gentleman and how to behave and how to treat people. And I always had a lot of respect for that. So I think that had an effect on me, seeing that, you know what, you don't have to battle everybody. You kind of start picking, use the term, is this a hill you're going to die on? Is it worth it? And that brings me to things I've said in elder meetings, and that is there was so much time wasted on dealing with things that in the big picture, they aren't big things at all. But we get so focused on, no, but we got to make this right. No, we don't have to make everything right. You know, Joanne's attitude would be more like, some of these things I just have to give up to God. You know,
surrender.
That's exactly it. Surrender is the perfect word. It's like, you're not called to fix this one, guy. You know, let me handle it. Whatever it may be, let me handle it. Okay. And that's the key, I think, and that goes to the maturity part of the maturation of, at some point you realize you don't have to fix all these things. It's okay that you can't fix this one or that one or whatever. You know, even when you're dealing with things like church discipline, those are hard. Those are really hard when you have known the people for so long and you reach the point where, you know what, I have to do this. I have to do what God is calling us to do, even if it's my brother, my sister, my child, my best friend, whatever. We have to hold each other accountable, you know. So, yeah, I'm definitely a different person than I was way back.
Hey, one more thing that you brought up was, and I can't remember who it was that gave you the book Mere Christianity.
Kent Adams.
Yeah.
Kent Adams.
Steve Johnson's brother-in-law.
Okay. So, how did that have an effect?
Yeah, you started to
your
talk about that book and then you kind of glazed over.
Yeah,
it,
well,
went on to something
because then I was thinking of other books that Ken had encouraged me to read after, like More Than a Carpenter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like, if I'm remembering it correctly, I just felt like it simplified things so much for me to be able to understand and not get so caught up in, you can get caught up in so much theological jargon, and I'm not faulting that, but sometimes I just need I need the simple version, you know? I just need the simple version. And I think that's what a lot of people maybe sometimes need is, you know, the whole saying about, you know, keep it simple, stupid, kiss. Sometimes I think we need to do that. I remember we had a professor in college, Joanne and I, who said, if you're really struggling with a subject, find that same subject on a much lower grade level where they're talking about it to help you start understanding it.
So along those lines, I'm curious, Rich, was there, can you point to a specific moment in your life where you felt you found salvation?
I wouldn't say my experience coming back from the hospital was when I found salvation. That particular experience would be more when I realized I need to give my lifestyle up, and there's something here, and I got to find out what it is, and God just give me some guidance. As far as actually finding it, I would say that came more with my one-on-one with Ken Adams and going through books with him, because then I had it, and that's when I realized I wanted to be baptized.
Wow.
And why I wanted to be baptized. And that's when that would be more the point of what I think answers your question better than the crisis thing of, okay, I give up, you know. Yeah, I gave up.
The loss of the child.
Yeah. And that was hard, you know. That was hard, but I think...
well, they probably work hand in hand, right?
Yeah. But you know what? Another example, it gives you an opportunity to be able to relate to people later on who go through that.
Yeah.
And say,
because we know
we've been there.
Many people that have gone through that and lost children.
Yeah.
What's the average amount of time a person or family spends within a congregation?
You mean with all the different activities that are going on, or
I mean, you've been here like almost 50 years.
Yeah.
That's got to be fairly rare these days, I would imagine.
Oh, you mean like in staying in one place, or staying within the envelope of Christianity
staying in one
itself?
place. I think about, as I reflect on friends, right? It's like almost every single person I know who is part of a church, they've left because there's been a moment of pain or turmoil or hurt or disagreement, and they pick up and leave, right? I'm not dealing with this. And I hear this story again and again and again and again. No, not just gonna leave, or something changes or whatever, right? And yet you've stayed. And you've already talked about, there've been moments of trial. And so, that's interesting to me, but I'm curious, has there been a specific trial here that maybe tested you and you came out the other side of it stronger? Or
there was this time I was in a position of leadership here, and there were things going on within my school district that involved the union, the superintendent, the president of the union, and some things that they were doing illegally. And one of the people involved also happened to be in our church, and at the time was the principal of the high school. And I brought at that time, I was the chair of the board. I brought to the group, I said, there are some issues that are going to come up that are not going to go well. I said, and you guys need to know this ahead of time. I told them what was coming down, with the superintendent, with the person that's the principal, who's a member of our church. His family was involved in our church. And it did not go well. I mean, it wound up, the superintendent and the president of the union were trying to get rid of me. I was a tenured teacher, and they were trying to get rid of me, and they were making up stuff. They were doing everything in their power to get rid of me. And I brought it to the board of elders, the deacons at the time, and I look at it as they basically dropped the ball. And what happened was they asked me to leave the meeting. I came in, I sat in here, and I sat here for a long time, probably over an hour. And then they called me back in and they said, we want you to resign from the board, because they didn't want to deal with the flack of what was going on in the community. That's how I interpret it, and I still do. I haven't changed my thoughts on that. But they didn't want to deal with it, and they basically wanted it to go away. And it wasn't going away. I knew it wasn't going away. So when they did that, not only did I was heartbroken. I didn't even go home that night. I think Jeff may have been in Romania because he wasn't part of that, okay? But I handed the keys to somebody. I had a key to the building, and that was it. I walked out, and I didn't come back. I didn't come back for a while. And different people tried to, want to talk about it, whatever. There wasn't anything to talk about because they didn't want to address what the problem was. And I'm the kind of person that there's a problem, let's address it. It doesn't have to go how I want it to go, but let's address it. And it was more like, no. And not to knock Swedes, my wife's partially Swedish, but it's the Swedish mentality of we're not going to deal with confrontation. We're just not going to deal with confrontation. And I don't buy that. I'm Irish. We deal with every confrontation.
We go into it.
But even in fairness to the Irish, they can deal with all those confrontations, and even after they beat each other up, they can go to the bar together and sit and have a drink. Okay. And
the Swedes didn't drink either. So
no, what are they going to do? Have coffee with an egg in it? Gee whiz. So anyway, no, I left. I literally stopped coming. Joanne was still coming. She was praying about it. It went on for probably close to a year. And I was at the point where, you know what? I don't even know why I'm a member here. You guys say you're going to deal with things, but you're not dealing with this. Everything that I've been taught and everything that I've done has always been we deal with the situations, but it didn't go away. And finally, it was Pastor Jeff who kept the relationship with me. I had even been suspended as a teacher for a while, and I wound up winning that case, but still I had been suspended. And while I was suspended, I went back to my roots of working in construction. And I was working, doing scaffolding and stuff at the steel mills in Gary. Pastor Jeff would come down at least once a month and drive down to Gary and have lunch with me just to see how I'm doing. He's the only one. He was the only one of all of the guys that I thought were brothers, and they were, but at that time, they didn't know how to deal with it. Jeff never gave up on me or on a relationship. His feeling was, this is my brother. I still need to make sure I know how he's doing right now, And I really appreciated that. And that kept me from leaving the church. I was at the point where I was going to resign because I felt like it was It did not mean anything if we're not doing what we say we're doing, Which is why maybe I'm so headstrong sometimes, Mike, and when we're dealing with a discipline thing, it's like, no, we have to do this. Mm-hmm. We have to deal with this, But anyway, so that went on for a while, and then finally, through Jeff's nurturing, I guess you call it, and through Joanne's praying, I decided, okay, you know what? I need to at least be coming back to church with my wife. And I did, but I would not take on any leadership role at all. I refused. I would not put my name in. I would not vote on elders each year. I just felt like, no, there's this disconnect that has to be worked out. And eventually, I told Jeff this. I said, God's really been working on my heart that I think I'm supposed to be involved again. And several years ago, I decided to start voting again on elders. And then I allowed my name to be put in as an elder, and I wound up getting asked to be an elder, But anyway, that was the toughest one.
Was there ever any resolution or?
Well, there was from some people, but it was more individual. I had some of the guys that were on the elder board, deacon board, come up to me afterwards and say, I'm so sorry, we didn't handle that right. And it goes back to, well, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to forgive them. They're human. Maybe I wouldn't have made the right choice on something that would have been just as important to them, But God didn't, because of people like Jeff and my wife, God didn't let me just walk away.
I think you just answered this question, but as you reflect back on that challenge now, that trial, what was the lesson that the Lord was trying to teach you?
Well, I'll tell you what I'll tell my wife too is all the stuff that was going on through school. I mean, there were so many people that didn't know the story and just automatically assumed that, well, he must have done this or that or whatever. And it wasn't there wasn't any way even to defend yourself at that time. But the lesson for me was, if I had to do it over again, I would make sure that I better protected my family. Because I didn't even go to my son's graduation because I basically wasn't allowed to be there because of the lawsuits going on and all this stuff. And going back as far as your comment, the guy that was a union leader, he wound up acknowledging that what he did was illegal, and he sent it out to the entire membership. And that was kind of a vindication for me. Too little, too late, but he did acknowledge it. And I respect him for that he didn't just sit on it and bury it. The superintendent never acknowledged anything. He died taking that to his grave, basically. He was a bitter person. But for me, the lesson for me more would be, don't ever get so deep in something. Like I used the term earlier about, is this a hill worth dying on? It's not a hill worth dying on when it's affecting your wife and your kids in the community, where they have to answer, well, why is Rich this? Or why is Dad this? Or why is your dad this? My kids, to their credit, would, well, you need to talk to my dad. You want to get the story, you need to talk to my dad. That was probably one of the most hurtful things I felt within the time in the church,
Are you at peace with that pain today? Have you been able to surrender that pain?
Yeah, because I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be involved in all the things I am if I wasn't at peace with it,
Sure. Yeah.
And no, I just look at it as, okay, well, that's another thing I didn't say, but years ago, literally, I prayed, and Jeff always cracks up when I tell him about this. He remind him because he remembers it. I prayed for trials. And the reason I prayed for trials was I thought trials make you a stronger person. And they do. Mm-hmm. There's no question in my mind that they do. But Jeff would just say, nobody prays for trials. I go, I did, Jeff. And guess what? Mm-hmm. God gave them to me. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, in a trial, you're faced with a choice.
Yeah.
You can turn toward the Lord or you can turn away, but you can't be complacent. And it sounds like what you were praying for was don't allow me to be complacent.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying even on the racial issue. You can be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution.
Yeah.
We chose to be part of the solution. And we see that in our kids' lives too. You know, my daughter is an inner city school social worker in a really rough area in the city of Chicago.
Your family lives in Chicago.
They grew up in Lawndale. They raised their kids in Lawndale, you know, one of the most highly gang infested areas in the city. But they felt a calling that that's where they're supposed to be. So I give them a lot of respect. Devin's the same way. Mark's the same way. Scott's definitely the same way. Ryan, because he's in law enforcement, he looks through a different lens. But they all respect each other. You know, my kids are probably somewhat all over the place in terms of politically in how they may view a situation. But they all love each other and they can all sit in a room together and argue jokingly and good-naturedly and be able to say why they have a different opinion. And they will attribute that to, well, that's how mom and dad raised us. So that's affirmation too. You know, like you say about affirmation with the grandkids, that's affirmation for us when you see that in your kids. And you're going to see that with your kids.
It's the Irish blood in you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, the Irish can be clannish. But clannish in a good thing.
They can argue and fight and wrestle but also love one another.
Well, because they can have a beer afterwards.
Exactly.
They'll all sit and cook together, you know,
Right.
and make these exotic meals of food I can't stand. You know? But being in Sawyer Highlands has been a great experience for Joanne and I. The one thing we wrestle with now, we had a 1-story house, 1-bedroom, 1-story house. Because I'm a carpenter, I made it into a 2-story, 5-bedroom house with 2 kitchens. And we raised all of our kids there. All of our grandkids come there now. But we're at the point, I'm going to be 76. We're at the point of, okay, is this a house we hang on to? You know, do we downsize? Well, Father's Day was a perfect example why we don't downsize right now. They were all there. They all want to be there. They all like to be there. But at some point, if we ever did leave, I would never want to leave the area in terms of my closeness to the church. I'd want to be in a close enough proximity. And Joanne and I both have talked about this a lot. We were just talking about this more earlier today at lunchtime. We want to be close enough that we could always come here and this would always be our home church because that's how we see it. We see that we're here to lay bury us, you know. And hopefully our kids are too. I think Ryan and Devin feel very much strongly about that. They're the 2 that are still in the church. You know, and that's another thing when you talk about your kids. There's a sense, we're not supposed to be proud, but there's some things that it is okay to be proud about. There's a sense of pride when you see your younger sons spiritually leading worship, becoming elders, taking on responsibilities of guiding the future of the church and guiding their children. That's real encouraging for me. It's real encouraging when I see these young guys coming up, you know, the Caleb Drydens and the Jeff Bodkeys and all these younger guys. That's real encouraging for an older person to see church is going to be in good hands, you know? And that's important. At least my age, we're looking at what's the next generation going to be like? Are they there and are they ready? And have you done all you can to help them be ready, you know?
Yeah, so as you think about that next generation, you've mentioned your age multiple times.
Yeah.
You know, we all have an expiration date. We just don't know when it is.
Absolutely.
As you think about those next generations, your kids, your grandkids, and this congregation, after being here for as long as you have, what is your message to all of them?
In any way you can, stop from having fractured relationships with anybody, because so much of what we do and who we are really comes down to what kind of relationships we have with each other. And I would also encourage my grandkids, don't give up. God doesn't say if you have a trial, it's when you have trials. You're positive you're going to have trials. That's part of growing up. It's how you face the trials and how you deal with them is where the key comes in. But the message for my kids is also marry well in terms of don't just jump into a marriage. Make sure that person you're marrying is solid and that you guys are walking together with the Lord, because I saw that, especially, I just had my oldest grandchild get married a couple weeks ago, and he married a young gal from Wheaton. And the two of them, they are so solid in what they want to do and how they want to walk with God. He's a youth pastor in Chicago, and she's going to be taking on a role as a children's ministry, kind of like what Kelsey does here. That'll be her role. But they're at a church in Chicago, not too far from where Laura and Brent live now. So it's kind of cool to see that. But they were a good example for me, because there were 112 people invited to the wedding. At every single spot, at every plate, there was a handwritten card to each person saying what you meant to them in their life. Okay? Whether even if it was the youngest, Seamus. Seamus is 4 years old. Seamus got a card just saying what he meant to them. But I was thinking, that's what I want to see, is I want them to be servants in their community, in their church, in their family. Because if everybody has the attitude of being a servant, everybody's going to be taken care of. We all are, And I think serving, Christ gives us the greatest example of serving. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Love God and love people.
And even when the pain comes, or there's disappointment or conflict that do come, there's still this call to serve. And that's exactly what Jesus did for us.
Yeah. And even if you have a bad experience, Mike, and you feel like, I can't do this here anymore, that doesn't mean that you don't still want to serve. You just got to figure out, maybe I'm supposed to serve somewhere else, but I still want to serve, So I hope they have that. I hope that Joanne and I have been an example for them, and even for people within the congregation, that, no, we're supposed to serve. And that makes me think too, and Mike knows I've said this in our elder meetings, is when a person says they want to become a member of the church, I really appreciate that, but I don't necessarily want someone to become a member because this is what you're supposed to do. I want them to become a member because they want to serve. And I want to know, at least in their mind, where do they see that they can be serving? Even if it's as, I don't mean this derogatory when I say simple, even if it's as simple as being part of a prayer group, or agreeing that I want to pray for the youth ministry every week or whatever, or getting involved in, there are positions that we need in every church. Hey, we need help with VBS, or we need help with the garage sale, or we need help with maintaining the building, stuff like that. There's so many places people can serve. And sometimes maybe we aren't good enough at, or good at drawing that out of a person to, when we do a membership meeting or a membership class, for example, say, asking them, where do you see yourself serving in the church?
Well, Rich, we appreciate you and you sharing your story and your thoughts and the way the Lord has worked in you. And like I said, you've been faithful in this church and ministry that you've had. And you knew me when I was just a junior high, senior high kid, and throughout the years, what's really cool is I've gotten to see, I was in senior high or college and serving your kids, or pouring into your kids, and then to see them, as peers now, but also seeing their kids being raised up in here has been an absolute joy.
Oh yeah. Mike, when Devin had May up on front on worship one Sunday, here's my granddaughter singing with her dad, leading worship. It was that was touching for me. That was just really touching.
And what I saw was junior high freshman kid sitting in that gym with a guitar. Devin, anywhere he went, a guitar in his hand, and to see him really engage with the church community, and
he's got a real heart,
and bleed for it, and he loves this church and he's committed, and you can definitely see it in various ways. But then to see the gifts when he leads worship here, but then also you see these kids being raised up in it and singing along with him. There's something beautiful about that legacy that started with you and Joanne, and it continues on. And there's something beautiful about that, and it does speak to, and I think Brendan kind of brought it out, there's something too with being here for so many years and sticking through even the difficulties and the challenges, and the Lord being gracious and protecting you in those ways, where you see the fruits of that.
Yeah.
And it's not just, it's not just my family, but it's your family. It's, other people's family that I've grown up with and seen, and now our families are interacting and have community with one another. There's something real beautiful about that. And you probably brought it out when you said, hey, there's something here that we see as unique.
Oh, no question in my mind.
And
Mike.
a gift of grace from the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a very unique church.
Yeah.
We really do.
That way. But thank you, Rich, for sharing and coming here. And
thanks for asking me.
opening
I
up.
appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
I'm sure people will be inspired and uplifted by your story and your sharing. So thanks, Rich.